When we're asked to simplify an expression that has a radical in the denominator, we're going to use a process we've used before where we multiply the denominator by the conjugate. And this is a very similar process to what we did when we had i's on the bottom of fractions. We don't want i's down there, we don't want square roots down there, and so the power of the conjugate is that it's going to get rid of those square roots in the bottom. So in a case like this, the conjugate, if you recall, is just change the sign in the middle of that expression. So instead of square root of 5 minus 1, I'm going to multiply by square root of 5 plus 1. But I have to make sure I do the same thing to the top and bottom, because really what I just wrote down in purple is something divided by itself, and really all this is just a 1. And if you multiply something by 1, you're not changing its value. So watch how this is going to work. In the top, I'm basically distributing that 2. So I'm multiplying 2 by that expression. Now remember, you multiply numbers inside of a square root and outside of a square root, but they don't mix and match, so that would just be 2 square root of 5 plus 2 in the top. So notice there's still a square root in the top, or there's now a square root in the top. That's okay. What you can't have is a square root in the bottom. And so what I have to do is I really have these two pieces to multiply together. And if you watched our last couple of videos, I showed you that I like to use the box method to multiply something like this. If you prefer FOIL, if you can do this in your head, any of those ways would work out just as well. And if you watched our previous video about multiplying with conjugates, you'll see why this is going to work. Certain parts should cancel out. So when I multiply these two pieces together on the bottom, square root of 5 times square root of 5 is the square root of 25, which works out to be just a regular 5. The square root of 25 is just regular 5. Negative 1 times the square root of 5 is a negative square root of 5. 1 times the square root of 5 is square root of 5. And you'll see that those boxes are going to cancel out. The square root should all be gone when you're done with this process. Finally, for that last box, negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Be careful, I have a lot of people put 0 there because they start adding. You're still multiplying. At this point, once the box is filled out, now you'll be adding stuff up. So we've already said that those like terms will cancel out. When you multiply by a conjugate, that will always happen. If it doesn't, you did something wrong. So all that's left is 5 minus 1. No more square roots. That's the power of multiplying by the conjugates. That works out to be just 4, of course. And so going back to my original problem, there's my 4 in the denominator, and there's my final answer. Well, almost my final answer. You'll notice that I did get rid of the square root in the bottom, which was my goal. And the reason I said, oops, almost my final answer, is you always want to see if you can simplify before you finish. And we've talked about this before. If you take a look at all the numbers that are outside of a radical, 2, 2, and 4, if all of those numbers can be divided by the same thing, then you have to divide them by the same thing. And this time they can all be divided by 2. So let's go through and divide all those numbers by 2. I'd get square root of 5 plus 1 over 2, and there is going to be my final simplified answer. So we still have a square root, but it's no longer in the denominator, and that was our goal. We wanted to remove that.